If you loved her, why did you sign? Tayo's small voice did not shake. Kang Ji-ho stood in the witness box with a bruise fading at his jaw, a courtroom full of reporters staring holes into his back, and 3 4-year-old boys looking at him like truth had finally grown legs and found him. He could have lied. Men like him had built empires on cleaner lies than this one. Instead, he looked at the child with his mother's eyes and said, "Because I thought control could protect what trust required. And I was wrong." The silence that followed felt alive. But that was not how this part began. For that, you have to watch the part 1 first. And if you have watched the part 1, thanks for watching. And here is second part for you. Subscribe the channel for more interesting stories. This part began with Detective Park reaching for the gun at his ankle and Sun-ho moving before the rest of the room remembered how. The Annex lobby exploded into motion. Sun-ho's shoe came down hard on Park's wrist, bone cracked. The gun skidded across the polished floor and spun under a cream sofa. One of Ji-ho's men tackled the nearest security guard into a glass table. It shattered in a bright, expensive spray. Naomi did not look at any of that. She was on her knees with June in her arms, her body curved over him so completely that even fear had to wait its turn. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own breathing had gone sharp and uneven. "Baby, look at me. Look at me." June's little hands clutched the front of her coat. His toy car dug into her wrist. "Mommy," he said again, voice thin from terror. "I was brave." Naomi closed her eyes for half a second, because that sentence almost ended her. "I know." Ji-ho turned once, just once, to make sure they were behind him. That glance cost Hae-rin enough time to run. She kicked off one silver heel, snatched a black leather folder from the sofa, and bolted toward the side corridor with the speed of a woman who had no intention of being poor, disgraced, or caught. "Sun-ho," Ji-ho said. That was all. Sun-ho peeled off Park, shoved him face first into the marble floor, and went after her. Park spat blood and laughed once. "You're late," he said, looking up at Ji-ho with one swelling eye. "Again." Ji-ho crouched in front of him slowly. The room around them still rang with running feet, broken glass, shouted orders. But his voice stayed soft. Softer than any decent man's should have in a moment like that. "You took a child," he said. Park tried to grin. "It got her here." Ji-ho hit him once. Not wildly, not repeatedly. Just one clean, brutal strike that shut him up and snapped his head sideways against the floor. Naomi flinched at the sound, not because she pitied Park, but because rage in quiet men always landed harder than noise. Police sirens rose outside the Annex. Real police this time, not Park's theater. Naomi tightened her arms around June and pushed to her feet. Her knees were unsteady. Her palms burned from the floor. There was dust on the front of her coat and powder from the bullet-scarred pillar in her hair. Ji-ho turned toward her. For the first time since she had met him in a blood-slick garage, he looked openly afraid. Not of bullets, not of scandal, of what might have happened if he had been 3 minutes later. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Naomi held June tighter. "No thanks to any of this." His jaw tightened once. He looked down at the child in her arms. June looked back with the solemn suspicion of a boy who had spent the worst hour of his short life being told to stay quiet by monsters. Their faces shared almost nothing obvious at first glance. Not enough for strangers. Too much for Naomi. She saw the second Ji-ho noticed it too. The stillness in him changed. His eyes dropped to the child's brow, the stubborn line of his mouth. The way June stood, even while trembling, chin up, tears contained, fury first. Something hit him hard and low and final. "His name," Ji-ho said, voice roughened at the edges now. "What is his name?" Naomi should have lied. She had lied to systems, to forms, to guards, to women who smiled while asking for details they had not earned. But she had promised herself, sometime in a prison infirmary with 3 infants crying against her chest, that her sons would not be raised on the kind of lies men used to escape consequences. So she looked straight at the man who had signed papers and changed the architecture of her life. "June," she said. Ji-ho did not move. "And the others?" It came out quieter than anything he had said to her before. Her throat tightened. "Tail," she said. A pause. "Dara." Park made a wet sound that might have been a laugh through blood. "Well," he muttered, "that explains the face." Ji-ho did not even look at him. The police burst in seconds later, weapons drawn, voices sharp, shoes pounding the marble. By then, Sun-ho had Hae-rin. He dragged her back through the side corridor, barefoot and furious, silk torn at the hem, diamonds still blazing at her throat, like she thought wealth was a form of innocence. The black folder was under his arm. Hae-rin's face had changed completely. All polish gone. Nothing left but rage and disbelief. She looked at Naomi first, then at June in her arms, then at Ji-ho. And whatever she read there frightened her for the first time. "You can't do this," she snapped. "You have no idea what is in that file." Ji-ho turned at last. "I know enough." "You know nothing," her voice cracked. "I built half your world." He stared at her the way men stared at buildings they had finally decided to demolish. "No," he said. "You decorated it." When the police cuffed Park and took Hae-rin's wrists behind her back, Naomi did not feel triumph. She felt tired. Bone deep, prison deep, motherhood deep tired. Ji-ho stepped toward her. She stepped back. That tiny movement landed between them with the force of a slammed door. He stopped. The lobby smelled like gunpowder dust, lilies, blood, and expensive perfume failing to cover panic. Red and blue police light flashed over the walls and caught in the broken glass on the floor. June buried his face in Naomi's shoulder. Ji-ho looked at the child, then at Naomi, then at the space she had made between them, and accepted it without protest. "Take him home," he said. Naomi laughed once, not kindly. "Home," she repeated. "That word has had a terrible year every time you get involved." He did not defend himself. That made it worse. A detective approached, notebook out, expressions suddenly much more careful now that Kang Ji-ho was standing in the middle of his own scandal. "We'll need statements." Naomi shifted June higher on her hip. "Tomorrow." "Ms. Adebayo." "Tomorrow," Ji-ho said quietly. The detective stopped talking. Of course he did. Naomi hated that too. Outside, the night air bit through her coat. News vans had already begun to gather at the end of the street, satellite dishes lifting like hungry heads toward disaster. Sun-ho opened the back door of a black sedan. Naomi did not move. "I didn't ask for a car."
No, Sunho said, but you have one. June lifted his head just enough to stare at him. You're the Scar Man. Sunho actually blinked. Naomi nearly smiled, despite herself. Yes, he said. June considered this. You kick good. For the first time in all the years Naomi had known silence from Jiho's world, Sunho looked almost embarrassed. I've practiced. Naomi got in the car with June, and no gratitude on her face. Just before the door closed, Jiho spoke. I looked for you. She froze with one hand on June's back. The sentence was simple. No ornament, no excuse. Simple was always what hurt most. She looked up at him through the open door, soul wind moving the loose braid by her cheek. And still, she said quietly, you signed. The door shut between them. Dami opened the apartment door before Naomi knocked. The smell of burnt toast, cardamom tea, and nervous pacing hit first. So did the noise. Dara was crying because he thought June had been eaten by corporate bad guys. Teo was not crying at all, which was worse. He sat straight-backed on the sofa in dinosaur pajamas with his little fists on his knees, like he had already decided that emotion was a luxury for people whose lives had been easier. Naomi stepped inside with June in her arms. The room broke open. Dara launched first. June! He hit Naomi's legs at full speed, then latched onto his brother the second June slid down. Teo stood slower, eyes wide and hard and bright, and came last. That was how he loved. Carefully, as if the world had already taught him that joy could be punished for being loud. Naomi dropped to the floor and took all three boys into her arms. Her cheek pressed against one soft head, then another. Warm skin, soap, tears, peanut butter breath. Alive, alive, alive. Dami crouched beside her and touched the back of Naomi's neck. You good? Naomi let out one breath that shook halfway through it. No. Fair. June pulled back first. His little face was pale but stubborn. The pretty mean lady said not to cry, he announced. Naomi moved the hair off his forehead with trembling fingers. And what did you say? June frowned. Nothing, because talking to stupid people is a waste. Dami slapped a hand over her mouth and turned away because laughter had arrived too close to panic. Naomi stared at her son. Then she looked at Teo. Who taught him that? Teo pointed with solemn betrayal at Dara. Dara gasped. Snitching is illegal. That broke the tension just enough for breathing to return. Sunho stood by the door while the family closed around itself.
He waited until Naomi rose. The file Heirin tried to take, he said. There are copies of the marriage certificate in it. Dami's head whipped up. Naomi went still. The room got smaller. Her sons, used to reading weather by the shape of her face, went quiet. Dami took them toward the bedroom with cartoon-level drama and promises of emergency waffles, because sometimes survival required performance. When the door shut, Naomi turned to Sunho. Say that again? He did, every word slower. The civil marriage certificate, City Hall, 8 days before her arrest, filed under security seal because Jiho believed public paperwork would make her harder to reach. Naomi looked at the wall above Sunho's shoulder, because if she looked directly at a person, she might do something unhelpful. He married me, she said, almost to herself, and then signed papers to have me remanded. Yes. The honesty of that answer was almost offensive. Dami came back from the bedroom with flour on one sleeve and murder in her eyes. I'm going to need 5 minutes alone with your boss. No, Naomi said immediately. 15? No. Dami folded her arms. Then at least tell me the man has a real suffering arc planned. Swanho said, He is already in it. Naomi gave a short, humorless laugh. Good. By sunrise, the whole city knew. The headlines hit in waves. Secret wife, foreign translator, prison children, charity fraud, missing millions. The ghost of Seoul exposed. Paparazzi waited outside the preschool. 2 opinion shows argued about Naomi's motives without once using her full name correctly. One anchor called her a romantic opportunist. Another called her a hidden victim. Neither had held a prison-issued blanket over 3 newborns through a winter blackout. Jiho's board wanted a denial by noon. He gave them silence until 11:58, then walked into the press room of Kong Holdings, wearing black and no tie, and said, into 16 microphones and a wall of cameras, There will be no denial. There will be statements when the children are protected first. That bought exactly 8 minutes of respect and 200 new rumors. Naomi watched the clip on mute while Tayo lined up toast crusts on a plate, and Dara announced that news people had bad eyebrows. June sat on the floor with blocks and built a tower high enough to destroy. A knock came at the door. 3 soft knocks, then 2. Swanho's pattern. Naomi opened it and found Jiho on the other side. No guards in front, no cameras behind. Just him, a bruise at his jaw darkening under morning light, coat open, hands empty. The stairwell smelled like sugar from the bakery downstairs and damp cement from the rain. Dami appeared behind Naomi, saw who it was, and whispered, "Oh, I'm staying. I don't care what anyone says. This is premium television." Naomi did not smile. Jiho looked past her once, not into the apartment, toward the sound of small voices. Then he brought his gaze back to her face, like it cost him. "I need to see them." Naomi folded her arms. Need is a dramatic word for a man who had 4 years. His eyes dropped for half a second. When they came back, they were darker. "I know." "No," she said. "You don't get to say that like we are both discussing weather. You know names now. You do not know 4 years." He accepted that too. No defense. Always worse. Dami leaned against the wall beside the doorway. "I can go make violent tea if you want." "Stay," Naomi said. Jiho glanced at Dami. "You hate me." "Very efficiently." "Good." Dami blinked. "Rude, but self-aware." Naomi stepped into the doorway so he could not see inside. "You do not come into my son's lives because your conscience finally developed a pulse. My conscience had a pulse the whole time." "Then it's a shame it never learned to sign different papers." That landed. He let it. The bakery's mixer downstairs rumbled through the floorboards. Somewhere in the street, a scooter passed with music too loud for morning. Jiho said, "I found out 2 months after your sentencing that the evidence chain was falsified." Naomi's fingers tightened over her own elbows. "I tore Park's life apart looking for where they moved you. They buried your transfer under a trafficking case in Busan, then another in Daejeon. By the time I got a judge to unseal it, you had been released under a different filing name." She said nothing, because some griefs were too large to answer on the first hearing. He continued, voice even, as if only control was keeping the bones in him aligned. "I paid for the prison nursery in your facility after the second winter." Naomi looked at him sharply. "I didn't know it was you." "I made sure you wouldn't." "Why?" "Because I did not deserve to be the reason your children were warm, and the reason they were there. Silence. Dami, for once, had no commentary ready. From inside the apartment came Dara's voice. "Mommy, is that the angry tall man?" Naomi closed her eyes. Dami turned away to cough into a laugh. Jiho's mouth almost moved. Almost. "Children are honest," he said. "So are women you keep underestimating." A beat passed. Then June appeared in the hallway behind Naomi, one sock on, one sock off, toy car in hand. He looked at Jiho with grave concentration. "You're the man from last night." Jiho crouched slowly, bringing himself down to eye level. He did it like a man approaching a wild thing he wanted very badly not to scare. "Yes." June considered him. "You hit the bad cop." "Yes." "Good." Naomi should have shut the door then. Instead, she watched the impossible thing happen. Tayo appeared next, all solemn dignity and dark eyes. Dara followed, carrying a spoon for reasons known only to God and 4-year-olds. The three of them stared at Jiho. Jiho stared back, and something in the room shifted beyond language. Because blood was not magic. Because fatherhood was not earned by resemblance. Because none of that changed the years Naomi had carried alone. And still, there was something brutal about seeing a man recognize his own heart outside his body and in triplicate. Dara pointed the spoon at him. "Are you rich?" Dami made a sound that had to be swallowed into her hand. Jiho, to his credit, answered with complete seriousness. "Yes." Dara nodded. "Can you buy dinosaurs?" "Probably." Tayo frowned at his brother. "That's not the important question." He looked at Jiho with the intensity of a prosecutor in cartoon socks. "Did you make Mommy cry?" The room went silent so fast, the refrigerator hum became enormous. Jiho did not look at Naomi. He looked at the boy, asking him for a truth no boardroom, courtroom, or rival had ever forced out of him cleanly. "Yes," he said. Tayo's face hardened. "Then I don't like you." Jiho bowed his head once. "That seems fair." Naomi turned away because something about that answer had found a place in her chest she had kept locked on purpose. Dami rescued breakfast, or tried to. The next weeks passed like a held breath. The city would not let go of the story. Neither would Hading. Released on temporary medical bail after a conveniently dramatic panic collapse, she did what women like her always did when private cruelty failed. She went public. She sold herself as a betrayed fiancé. She claimed Naomi had manipulated a vulnerable chairman, forged affection into marriage, and hidden children for financial leverage. Jiho's lawyers tore through filings. Park, facing charges and abandoned by every useful ally, began talking. The memory card led to offshore accounts. The black folder held fake donor routes, shell companies, child welfare bribes, and 2 signed statements Park had not known Hading kept. The more evidence appeared, the uglier the truth became. None of it changed the fact that reporters now sat outside Naomi's language center, and boys at preschool were asking Tayo why his father had mob money. Naomi stopped taking the public bus. Not because she was afraid. Because fear was boring, and logistics were real. Jiho assigned protection anyway. She yelled at him for it in the parking garage of the language center, while cold wind carried the smell of rain and fried chicken from the shop next door. "I said no." and I ignored you. That is not a virtue. It is when your sons are followed from school." That stopped her. A second. Only a second. He saw it. Then she recovered. "You do not get to use them as your argument every time I say no." His jaw shifted once. "I will use whatever keeps them breathing." "See?" she snapped. "That right there. You make everything sound like a war." He stepped closer, coat moving in the wind, voice low. "For me, this is one." Naomi's eyes flashed. "For me, it was 4 years before you decided to arrive with strategy." He absorbed that hit, too. But this time, something in his control frayed. "You think I don't know what I cost you?" "No," she said. "I think you know exactly what you cost, and still expect competence to excuse it." The silence after that burned. Then a small voice came from the back seat of the SUV. "Mommy?" Both of them turned. June had unbuckled himself and was peering through the cracked window with deep suspicion. "Are you fighting?" he asked. "Or flirting badly?" Naomi closed her eyes. Ji-ho looked at the car, then back at her. The corner of his mouth moved in a way she had never seen fully become a smile. "Your son," he said quietly, "is merciless." "Our son," she almost said. Almost. Instead, she folded her arms tighter and walked to the car. That night, after the boys slept in a tangle of limbs and dinosaur blankets, Naomi stood at the apartment window with a mug of tea gone cold in her hands. The bakery downstairs had stopped for the night. The whole building smelled faintly of sugar, yeast, and rain trapped in brick. There was a knock at the door. Not Soon-ho's. 1. Pause. 1. Ji-ho. Naomi opened the door but did not move aside. He held out a flat paper bag. "What?" "School supplies." She frowned. "It's 11 at night." "Yes." "Do rich people shop for crayons after dark often?" Only when they were informed that Dara's class needed a cardboard solar system by Friday, and that Tayo had pretended not to care, but cared enough to hide the notice under the microwave. Naomi stared, then looked down at the bag. Poster paint, safety scissors, glue sticks, foam planets, 3 extra packs of crayons because Ji-ho had noticed June bit the blue ones. The apartment hallway went quiet around them. "How did you know about the blue crayons?" He gave the bag a slight lift. "I pay attention." That sentence should have felt gentle. Instead, it hit like grief. Because attention was the first form of love many women never received cleanly enough to trust. Naomi took the bag slowly. Their fingers brushed. Warm this time, not cold. "Thank you," she said, and the words cost her. Ji-ho looked at her like he knew exactly what they cost and had no intention of spending them cheaply. Then he said, "Mianhe." The Korean word was soft, barely above the breath carrying it. Naomi knew enough Korean by now to understand. Sorry. Not legal sorry. Not public sorry. Not strategy. Sorry. She gripped the paper bag harder. "You don't get to say that once and be finished." He nodded once. "I know." "Then what are you doing here?" He met her eyes. The hall light threw pale gold over the bruise at his jaw and the exhaustion under his gaze. Learning how long sorry takes. That might have undone her if the next morning had not detonated first. The child welfare officers arrived at preschool at 10:22 with sealed emergency papers, television cameras somehow already waiting, and two women in neutral suits whose smiles had the exact shape of danger, wearing policy language. Naomi got there 6 minutes later after Dami called screaming. Tayo and Dara were in the office. June was not. The sound Naomi made when she learned that was not a word. It was something older. Something dragged up from prison hallways and locked doors, and every nightmare in which she reached too late. The principal stood there wringing her hands. They said one child was taken for separate evaluation because of a custody discrepancy. Naomi slammed both palms on the front desk so hard the stapler jumped. A custody discrepancy? One of the women in suits stepped forward. Ms. Adebayo, given the criminal history attached to your sealed case and the newly established paternity questions, Naomi turned on her with a face that had survived institutions. Say one more rehearsed sentence to me and make it worth your dental bills. The woman actually stepped back. Dami whispered, viciously delighted despite the crisis. That's my girl. Jiho arrived before security could decide whether to interfere. The hallway changed when he entered. Not because he was loud, because everybody else got quieter. His coat was unbuttoned, tie half loosened, eyes dark enough to be alarming. Sun-ho was behind him with a folder, a tablet, and two lawyers who already looked terrified of disappointing the wrong man. Naomi faced him with raw panic still cutting through her chest. They took him. I know. You were supposed to protect them. His expression did not change, but the words landed. She saw them land. Yes. That almost made her hit him. Instead, she said, through teeth locked against shaking, "Find my son." He stepped close enough for only her to hear. I will burn every legal bridge, buy every judge, tear apart every office in this city, if that is what it takes. Naomi looked up at him, eyes hot and furious. That is the problem. You still think this is a machine you can force. No, he said. This time I think it's my son. The word son cracked the room open for 1 second. Behind them, Tayo began crying quietly because he had heard it too. Dara gripped Naomi's coat and tried not to. Ji-ho looked past Naomi at the two boys in the office. Something in his face shifted. Then he turned to the child welfare woman. Who signed the transfer? She lifted her chin. I'm not authorized. Sun-ho placed the folder in Ji-ho's hand. Ji-ho opened it, scanned one page, and said the woman's full name, employment history, mortgage lender, and brother-in-law's unpaid bribery complaint in under 20 seconds. Her face emptied. Now, he said quietly, answer the question. She did. A family court judge. A sealed review order. Emergency relocation to the courthouse annex for protective assessment. Hyedin. Of course. Naomi laughed once, breathless and furious and almost unwell. She really does love a theatrical location. Ji-ho looked at her. We leave now. Dara tugged Naomi's sleeve. Mommy, are we coming? Naomi looked down at her sons, then at Ji-ho. Then at the entire grotesque machinery of official concern gathering around them with cameras already pointed, and pity already loaded. No, she said. Jiho's brow tightened. No? The boys come, all of them. It may not be safe. She leaned in until every syllable had somewhere specific to land. You should have stayed where it was safe, she said. You didn't. So now you're here. Something fierce and almost unwilling lit in his eyes. That was the first moment all day he looked less guilty than alive. The courthouse smelled the same as it had years ago. Wet coats, printer toner, old coffee. Naomi noticed that first and hated it. The same building, different children. Same man beside her. Same system trying to package catastrophe inside forms. The hallway outside Family Court 3 was packed with reporters, lawyers, clerks, and exactly the kind of spectators who claimed to hate scandal while arranging their schedules around it. June sat on a wooden bench between two social workers with his toy car in his lap and his mouth set in stubborn silence. Hei-rin stood at the far end in cream wool and victory. She lost half of that victory the second June saw Naomi. "Mommy!" Naomi moved fast. So did the guards. Jiho stepped between them with one raised hand. No shouting, no scene. Just one look. The guards stopped like their instructions had been rewritten by fear. Naomi reached June and dropped to her knees. He climbed into her arms so hard it nearly knocked her sideways. She held him with both hands and the last intact piece of her nervous system. Hei-rin smiled for the cameras. "There," she said sweetly. "Maternal instability on display." Naomi rose with June on her hip and turned. Whatever softness motherhood had left visible in her face was gone. "You want cameras?" she said. "Good." The hallway hushed. Jiho watched her. So did every lens in the corridor. Naomi handed June to Dami, who had arrived with the other two boys and righteous rage radiating off her like heat from an oven. Then Naomi stepped directly toward Hei-rin. "You forged evidence," she said clearly. "You bribed Park. You buried my appeal. You used my pregnancy as leverage. You used children's charities to wash money. And when prison didn't finish me, you came for my sons." Hei-rin's smile sharpened. "All allegations from a woman convicted." Sun-ho pressed a button on the tablet. The hallway speakers crackled. Then Hei-rin's own voice filled the corridor. "I built his public life for years. Then he meets a hungry translator in a parking garage. I was unwilling to lose to someone who didn't even understand the game." The recording from the Annex. Clear. Damning. Public. Park's voice followed. So did Hei-rin's mention of forged accounts, buried appeals, and sealed transfers. Every camera in the hallway swung. Hei-rin went white. "No." Jiho stepped forward at last. Not toward Naomi. Toward the court clerk standing frozen by the doors. "Request emergency admission of new evidence," he said. "And note for the record that I personally signed the remand authorization that enabled the original detention. Add my statement to the record as contributing cause." Naomi turned. The hallway tilted in a whole new way. He was not protecting himself. He was offering his own neck to the truth in public. The clerk stammered. "Chairman Kang, are you saying—" "Yes." The word landed clean. "I signed it. I was wrong." The reporters surged. The bailiff shouted for order. The judge inside, already hearing the chaos through wood and old hinges, ordered everyone into the courtroom. And that was how the whole city ended up watching the ghost of Seoul walk willingly into the same kind of room where he had once let a woman he had married stand alone. If you're still here, drop a heart in the comments, because this is the part where powerful men stop hiding behind power and start finding out what it costs to tell the truth late. The courtroom air was dry, overheated, and humming with bodies. Naomi sat in the front row with her sons arranged around her like small, furious bodyguards. Tayo refused to let go of her sleeve. Dara kept whispering battlefield updates to June, none of them legally relevant, and all of them emotionally correct. Ji-ho took the stand. For once, he looked like a man and not an institution. The oath clerk asked his questions. He answered all of them. When the judge asked whether he had anything to add regarding the original detention of Naomi Adebayo Kang, the room shifted at the surname. Naomi went still. So did he. Adebayo Kang. It had been true the whole time. Filed, hidden, weaponized, buried. Ji-ho looked at the bench, then at the lawyers, then at Naomi. Not long, just long enough. Yes, he said. I misused legal process to contain a threat I did not understand. The threat was not her. It was the people around me. I chose control over trust. That decision sent my wife to prison while pregnant with my children. No one in the room moved, not even the reporters. Because confession was always most shocking when it came from the person best positioned to avoid it. Hae-rin's attorney tried damage control. This is emotional theater. There is no proof of malicious intent. The chairman himself was manipulated. Ji-ho cut across him with almost frightening calm. Do not reduce what I did by blaming only the people who lied to me. Naomi lowered her eyes for 1 second because pain had a way of turning into tears if looked at too directly. The hearing turned brutal after that. Park's signed statement was entered. The charity records came in. The emergency child seizure order was traced to an illegal back-channel request from Hae-rin's office. 2 welfare officers lost their licenses before lunch. The judge ordered criminal referrals by afternoon. And then, because irony was alive and apparently employed by the Korean judiciary, the bench asked whether there was any immediate objection to supervised paternal contact, given the now confirmed biological relationship and the children's visible recognition of the father's presence. The whole courtroom looked at Naomi. She looked at her boys, then at Ji-ho, then at her boys again. Tayo whispered, "Can we vote?" Dara raised his hand immediately. "I vote maybe." June, from the center seat, studied Ji-ho with grave concentration. Then he slipped off the bench. The bailiff moved instinctively. Ji-ho lifted one hand, not commanding the room this time, just asking it not to frighten the child. June walked up the center aisle in dinosaur shoes, climbed the witness step halfway, and held up a bright blue pair of toy handcuffs taken from some forgotten costume bin in Dami's emergency bag. The courtroom almost smiled before remembering where it was. June looked at Ji-ho. "Did you know she was carrying us when you signed the papers?" His voice was small. The question was not. Ji-ho stood motionless near the witness stand, black suit immaculate, face unreadable in the way men learned to make it when they had spent half their lives being watched by enemies. but his hand tightened once at his side. Just once. A second boy stepped forward and lifted the other side of the bright blue toy handcuffs. "You jailed Mommy first," Dara said, with the careful fury only a 4-year-old could carry. "Now we jail you." Then Tayo, quiet and devastating, and older than any child should have needed to be, snapped the plastic ring around Jiho's wrist and whispered, as if delivering a verdict, "No running." The reporters forgot to breathe. Naomi forgot the sound of the judge shuffling papers. Jiho looked down at the 3 boys standing in front of him with his eyes, his mouth, his silence. And something in his expression broke so cleanly, it almost made a sound. He bent, slowly, carefully, until he was eye level with them. Then he said, "I did know, and I will spend the rest of my life being sorry." Tayo held his gaze. "That's not enough." Jiho nodded. "I know." Dara frowned. "Then what do we do?" Jiho looked at the tiny plastic cuff on his wrist, then at Naomi, then back to the boys. "You tell me," he said. The judge, to his everlasting credit, did not stop the moment. He let the silence do its work. He let the whole courtroom witness the thing institutions rarely measured correctly, that accountability meant nothing until it was legible, even to children. The formal orders came after. Protective custody stayed with Naomi, full criminal proceedings against Hayrin and Park, immediate injunction against media publication of the boys' school and home locations, monitored family visitation at Naomi's discretion. At Naomi's discretion. Those words felt better than revenge. Hayrin was led out of the courtroom pale, furious, and finally stripped of audience sympathy. Park, hauled in later under new charges, never made eye contact with anyone again. The city moved on more slowly than Naomi wanted, and faster than she expected. That was cities. They consumed women's suffering with appetite, and men's confessions with analysis. But consequences arrived. Hayrin lost her galleries, her donors, and the board seats she had once treated like a second spine. Park lost his badge, pension, and whatever version of himself still believed paperwork made evil look professional. 2 judges were investigated. 3 shell charities collapsed. The Annex was shut pending audit. None of that tucked her sons into bed. None of that gave her back years. But it was concrete. And concrete mattered. The first supervised visit took place in a quiet room at a family center that smelled like crayons, lemon cleaner, and institutional optimism. Naomi sat by the window. Dami sat beside her for atmosphere, which apparently meant glaring with incredible range. Jiho arrived 5 minutes early with no guards, no lawyer, and 3 age-appropriate dinosaur books after asking an actual preschool teacher for recommendations. Dara accepted him first, because Dara accepted everyone first. "Did you bring snacks?" "Yes." "Then your rehabilitation is going well." Tayo tried very hard not to smile. June stayed closest to Naomi and watched Jiho like he was a weather system requiring study before trust. Jiho did not push. He read the books. He let Dara interrupt 12 times. He answered Tayo's questions as if they were congressional hearings. "Why didn't you come sooner? Do bad people always wear nice coats? Can you really buy a dinosaur? Did you make Mommy sad on purpose? Why do grown-ups keep saying complicated words when they mean sorry?" Jiho answered every one. No retreat, no vagueness, no performance. By the fourth visit, June climbed into his lap without asking anyone's permission. Not for comfort, for vantage. "You're bony," June informed him. Jiho, who had once made prosecutors sweat by looking at them too long, said, "I'll take that under advisement." Naomi turned her face away because smiling had arrived before consent, and she was still angry enough to resent it. Weeks became months. Not magically, not cleanly. There were setbacks. Naomi found out Jiho had been paying the bakery owner extra to keep the apartment above market protection range, and she was furious. "I told you!" she snapped in the alley behind the bakery, while flour dust floated from the back door and early evening smelled like sugar and rain. "No managing." "I wasn't managing," he said. "You were arranging." "There is a difference." "There is a dictionary definition, maybe." He handed her a folded paper. She didn't take it. "What?" "Lease transfer." She stared. He continued, voice steady. "The building is in a trust now. Not mine. Yours. In the boys' names when they're older. The bakery owner remains owner of the business. You keep the apartment as long as you want. No rent, no leverage, no hidden clauses." Naomi looked at the paper like it might bite. "Why?" There it was. The same question that had lived between them from the first garage corridor to the courthouse. Why? Jiho stood in the alley with flour on one sleeve because Dara had hugged him after stealing bread, and answered without strategy for the first time in his life. "The first night we met," he said, "you wiped blood off my hand and told me not to make my problem everybody else's. You didn't know my name. You didn't care what I was worth. You were hungry, exhausted, and still more decent than anyone in my world had any right to expect." He paused. "Then I destroyed that decency with fear. I am trying to build something that does not ask you to thank me for what should have been yours untouched." Naomi said nothing, because some answers arrived too late to heal the same day and still mattered for the rest of your life. He looked at the paper in her hand. "You don't have to take it." She folded it once, then twice. "I know." At autumn's edge, Seoul turned sharp and gold. The boys grew louder, healthier, wilder. Tayo began bringing Jiho school drawings without admitting they were gifts. Dara decided Swonho was emotionally underdecorated and started sneaking stickers onto his coffee thermos. June, still the quietest, still the one who watched before speaking, asked Jiho one night at dinner, "If Mommy says no, do you listen now?" Naomi nearly choked on water. Jiho did not. "Yes." June narrowed his eyes. "Immediately?" A pause. Then, with grave honesty, "Faster than before." Dara cackled into his rice. Tayo looked deeply satisfied. Naomi, who had spent years carrying steel inside her spine because softness kept getting taxed, set down her chopsticks and laughed so suddenly the entire table went still just to hear it. Jiho looked at her. Not like a king, not like a criminal, not even like a man finally getting what he wanted. Like someone standing in sunlight after years underground and not trusting it yet. Later that night, after the boys slept in a barricade of stuffed dinosaurs and blankets, Naomi found him in the apartment kitchen washing tiny plastic cups by hand because he did not trust the dishwasher with objects of diplomatic importance. The room glowed warm under a single hanging lamp. Outside, night rain tapped the window lightly, a softer weather than the storms that had started them. You missed one, she said. He looked down. There was still soap in a blue cup. Tragic. She stepped beside him, took the cup, rinsed it, and set it on the rack. For a moment they stood shoulder to shoulder in domestic quiet so ordinary it was almost sacred. Then she said his name. Not Chairman, not Mr. Kang, not the distance that had protected her. Ji-ho. He went still. Completely. When he turned, something undefended had entered his face so quickly it made her chest tighten. In Korean, names by themselves could be an intimacy more dangerous than touch. She knew that now. So did he. You should stop doing that if you want me rational, he said softly. Naomi almost smiled. Maybe I don't. The silence shifted. Not tense this time. Charged. Deep. Patient. He lifted one hand very slowly and touched the side of her face, like he was asking the question with his body before daring to use words. Naomi did not move away. Neither did he. What happened next was not a beginning. It felt, somehow, like something returning, like a door that had been closed for a very long time, being opened from the inside. His forehead rested against hers first. Then his mouth found hers in the quiet between rain taps and sleeping children. No urgency, no claim. Just the unbearable gentleness of two people finally standing in the same truth without armor. When they pulled apart, the room stayed warm. He whispered, "Mianhe." Naomi put 2 fingers against his mouth. You are not allowed to use that word as your whole personality. A sound that was almost a laugh escaped him. Noted. If you made it to this moment, first of all, I see you. Drop a yellow heart in the comments. And listen, if you want what happens after this, the full family chaos, the healing, the jealousy, the boys running that man's entire life, you already know what to do. Winter came gently that year. Or maybe Naomi just had more reason to notice warmth. She went back to school part-time and started building the legal translation consultancy she had talked herself out of for years because survival had always left ambition waiting outside in the cold. Dami helped with the website and bullied 3 wealthy acquaintances into becoming clients. Soon-ho handled security audits without making it obvious, unless Naomi was paying attention. Ji-ho sold the Annex. Quietly. Completely. No press. He shut down 2 shell companies, cut 3 board members loose, and started appearing in daylight more often than night. The city called it a rebrand. Naomi, when she was feeling generous, called it delayed adulthood. The final gesture came on a Sunday morning at the old courthouse parking corridor where they had first met. The building had been renovated. New lights, fresh paint, cleaner air. Still the same place. Naomi stood under the brighter fluorescent glow with her sons racing toy cars along the low wall, and Dami arguing with Soon-ho about music quality. The smell of fresh concrete still lingered under winter cold. Ji-ho stepped out of the elevator carrying a framed picture. He handed it to Naomi. Not expensive art. Not some symbolic gift chosen by an assistant. Her mother's photograph. The original had been restored, the cracked glass replaced, the frame repaired, but not replaced entirely. One small mark remained near the corner, preserved on purpose. Naomi looked up. You kept this? Yes. For 4 years? Yes. Why? He glanced toward the boys, then back at her. "Because it was the first thing you picked up before you left with me," he said. "I wanted to remember what mattered to you before I tried to matter to you again." Her throat closed. Not painfully, just enough to remind her that tenderness and grief were cousins. Behind them, Dara shouted, "Mommy, Tayo says the rich man cheats at racing." Jiho looked over and said, "I prefer strategic acceleration." "That's cheating," Dara yelled back. June, from the wall, cupped his hands around his mouth. "No running!" Everyone laughed. Even Sun-ho, though he tried not to. Naomi slid her hand into Jiho's. The temperature outside was low enough to sting, but his palm was warm and steady and very real. Years ago, in this same corridor, he had told her to eat before going home. Years later, with 3 boys alive and loud and impossible around them, with justice incomplete but moving, with a future finally shaped by choice instead of damage, Naomi looked at him and found the right echo waiting. "You're still in jail," she said softly. He looked down at her, then at the plastic blue handcuffs Dara had clipped to his briefcase handle that morning and refused to remove. A real smile finally happened. "Yes," he said. This time, he sounded grateful.